Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. America is called the land of opportunity. But how did it truly become a melting pot? This question goes beyond slogans and patriotic ideals. It's a story of struggle, resilience, and the pursuit of a better life. The United States, as we know it today, was built by immigrants, people from all over the world who arrived with dreams, ambitions, and the hope of a brighter future. But their journeys weren't always easy. From the first European settlers in the 1600s to the massive waves of immigration in the 19th and 20th centuries, every group that arrived faced its own unique challenges, including discrimination, harsh living conditions, and opposition from those who had come before them. Yet, each new wave of immigrants helped shape the culture, economy, and identity of the United States, making it the diverse and dynamic nation it is today. This topic isn't just about history. It's about the present and future. Immigration continues to be one of the most debated issues in America, influencing politics, the economy, and social dynamics. Understanding the history of immigration helps us see how deeply connected it is to modern debates over policies, borders, and the very idea of what it means to be American. In this video, we'll explore the different waves of immigration, the struggles and triumphs of those who arrived, and how their contributions continue to shape the U.S. today. Whether your ancestors arrived on the Mayflower, passed through Ellis Island, or crossed the border in more recent decades, this is a story that impacts all of us. So how did America truly become the land of opportunity? Let's dive in. Early waves of immigration. The foundations of a nation. America's history as a nation of immigrants began long before it was even called the United States. From the 1600s onward, people from different continents arrived, each with their own reasons, whether escaping religious persecution, seeking wealth, or simply searching for a new beginning. These early settlers laid the foundation for what would later become a thriving, diverse society. Colonial era, 1600s, 1776. The first settlers, the earliest immigrants to North America, weren't just English. They came from many parts of Europe. While the British were the most dominant group, the Dutch, Spanish, and French also played significant roles in shaping early American colonies. British settlers. The search for freedom and opportunity. The British were the largest group of early immigrants, establishing the first permanent colony at Jamestown, Virginia, in 1607. Many came for economic reasons, hoping to profit from tobacco farming and trade, while others sought religious freedom. Puritans and Pilgrims. Seeking escape from religious persecution in England, the Puritans and Pilgrims established settlements like Plymouth, 1620, and Massachusetts Bay Colony, 1630. They envisioned America as a place where they could worship freely and build a religiously pure society. Quakers in Pennsylvania. Led by William Penn, the Quakers believed in religious tolerance, pacifism, and equality, making Pennsylvania a refuge for many religious minorities, including German-speaking immigrants. Catholics in Maryland. Catholics faced discrimination in Protestant England, so Lord Baltimore founded Maryland in 1634 as a haven for English Catholics. Though many British immigrants came voluntarily, others did not. Thousands of indentured servants arrived in America, agreeing to work for a set number of years in exchange for passage to the New World. Some were poor Europeans, while others were convicts sent as punishment. Dutch, Spanish, and French influence. While the British dominated the eastern seaboard, other European powers also played a role in early American immigration. The Dutch established New Amsterdam, modern-day New York, in 1625, bringing trade and a diverse mix of settlers including Germans, Scandinavians, and free black people. The Spanish controlled large parts of what is now Florida, Texas, California, and the Southwest, establishing missions and converting indigenous peoples to Christianity. The French settled in Louisiana, the Great Lakes region, and Canada, heavily, influencing the culture of places like New Orleans and Quebec. These early immigrants helped create the patchwork of languages, traditions, and economies that would later shape the United States. The 19th century boom, 1800s. The first massive immigration wave. The early 19th century marked the first major immigration boom in American history. As the young nation expanded westward, millions of people from Europe and Asia arrived, seeking new opportunities. Unlike the colonial era, where settlements were small and isolated, this new wave of immigrants flooded cities, factories, and farmlands, transforming America's economy and society. The Irish immigration wave, 1840s, the potato famine, one of the most well-known immigration waves of the 19th century, was that of the Irish, who arrived in massive numbers following the Great Irish Potato Famine, 1845-1852. The famine devastated Ireland, causing over 1 million deaths due to starvation and disease. With little hope for survival, over 1 million Irish immigrants fled to the U.S., settling primarily in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. Unlike earlier settlers who came with money or land, the Irish were often poor and unskilled, leading them to take jobs as factory workers, dock laborers, and domestic servants. They faced heavy discrimination, especially from Protestant Americans, who saw them as undesirable, Catholic, and politically dangerous. Many newspapers of the time portrayed the Irish as lazy, drunken, or untrustworthy. Despite these challenges, the Irish became a crucial part of American society, eventually rising into politics, law enforcement, and unions. German immigration. Seeking stability. While the Irish fled famine, German immigrants arrived in large numbers seeking political and economic stability. After the failed German revolutions of 1848, many intellectuals, artists, and political refugees fled to the U.S. Unlike the Irish, Germans often came with some financial stability, allowing them to buy land and settle in the Midwest, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Missouri, where they established farming communities. German culture had a lasting impact on America, introducing kindergarten, beer brewing, and holiday traditions like the Christmas tree. Though Germans faced less discrimination than the Irish, they were sometimes criticized for maintaining their language and customs rather than fully assimilating. By the late 1800s, German immigrants had surpassed the Irish as the largest ethnic group in the U.S. Chinese immigration and the California Gold Rush, 1850s. While most early immigrants came from Europe, the California Gold Rush, 1848-1855, led to a surge of Chinese immigration to the western U.S. Thousands of Chinese laborers arrived in California, hoping to strike it rich in gold mines. When gold opportunities dried up, many turned to building the Transcontinental Railroad, 1860s, enduring dangerous conditions and low pay. Anti-Chinese sentiment quickly spread, with white workers accusing them of taking jobs and depressing wages. This led to growing racial hostility, culminating in laws like the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which severely restricted Chinese immigration. Despite these hardships, Chinese immigrants helped build the infrastructure of the American West and established Chinatowns in cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, preserving their culture while contributing to American society. The impact of early immigration. By the end of the 19th century, the U.S. had become a true melting pot, shaped by generations of immigrants who brought with them new ideas, skills, and traditions. However, their journeys were often filled with discrimination, exploitation, and resistance from those who had arrived before them. These early waves of immigrants helped lay the groundwork for modern American identity, setting the stage for the even larger immigration waves that would follow in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. But as more immigrants arrived, so did tensions, leading to one of the most controversial periods in U.S. history, the fight over who should be allowed to call America home. Stay tuned as we explore how immigration continued to shape the nation in the decades that followed. Ellis Island and the Great Migration, the gateway to America. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the United States experienced one of the largest immigration booms in history. While earlier immigrants primarily came from Northern and Western Europe, this new wave brought millions from Southern and Eastern Europe, as well as Asia and the Middle East. For most of these newcomers, the first stop on their journey to a new life was Ellis Island, the famous immigration station in New York Harbor. This was where dreams began for some and ended for others. Ellis Island, 1892-1954, the gateway to America. Ellis Island opened in 1892 as the primary immigration processing center for those entering the U.S. through New York. Over its 62 years of operation, it processed over 12 million immigrants, earning its reputation as the gateway to America. The journey. Across the Atlantic, Most immigrants from Europe arrived by steamship, packed tightly into steerage class, the cheapest and most uncomfortable part of the ship. Conditions were harsh. Voyages lasted up to 2 weeks, often in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions. Many immigrants endured seasickness, malnutrition, and disease on the journey. Upon arriving in New York Harbor, passengers caught their first glimpse of the Statue of Liberty, a powerful symbol of hope. The inspection process. Harsh medical and legal examinations. Once immigrants arrived at Ellis Island, they underwent a rigorous inspection process that could determine whether they were allowed to enter the U.S. or sent back home. Medical inspections. Doctors examined each immigrant for diseases, disabilities, or signs of mental illness. Those deemed unfit were marked with chalk symbols on their clothes. 6-second physicals. A quick check for conditions like tuberculosis, trachoma, a contagious eye disease, or physical deformities. Legal inspections. Officials asked a series of 29 questions, including, where are you from? Do you have a job waiting for you? Do you have any relatives in the U.S.? The final decision. About 2% of immigrants were denied entry and sent back to their home countries, often separated from their families forever. For those who passed, Ellis Island represented the beginning of their American journey, but they still faced major challenges ahead. New immigration waves, late 1800s, early 1900s. By the late 19th century, the origins of immigrants shifted dramatically. Earlier waves had been primarily Irish, German, and British, but now Italians, Eastern Europeans, and Jewish refugees arrived in record numbers. Many of these newcomers faced prejudice and cultural barriers, but they also built thriving communities that still shape American cities today. Italian immigration, the search for work and stability. Between 1880 and 1920, more than 4 million Italians arrived in the U.S., many escaping poverty, political turmoil, and natural disasters in southern Italy. Most were poor farmers or laborers, looking for opportunities in America's growing cities. Many settled in ethnic enclaves like Little Italy in New York, Chicago, and Boston, where they could speak Italian and find familiar customs. Italians often took back-breaking jobs in construction, factories, and railroads, facing discrimination for being Catholic and seen as uneducated. Over time, they rose into business, politics, and organized labor, helping to build the infrastructure of modern America. Eastern European immigration. The Polish, Russians, and Slavs, millions of Polish, Russian, and other Slavic immigrants arrived seeking escape from poverty and political repression. Many were peasants and farmers who had lost their land due to industrialization in Europe. They found work in coal mines, steel mills, and factories, especially in cities like Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Cleveland. Slavic immigrants often faced harsh working conditions and dangerous jobs, but they played a vital role in the rise of American industry. Jewish immigration, fleeing persecution. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw a massive influx of Jewish immigrants, primarily from Russia, Poland, and Eastern Europe. Many were escaping anti-Semitic pogroms, violent attacks on Jewish communities, in the Russian Empire. Over 2 million Jewish immigrants arrived in the U.S. between 1880 and 1924, settling in cities like New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago. The Lower East Side of Manhattan became a major Jewish cultural and economic center. Jewish immigrants often worked in the garment industry, setting up shops and factories that would later become major businesses. Despite discrimination, they thrived in education, business, and politics, making a lasting impact on American culture. The rise of ethnic enclaves, the birth of Little Italies, and Chinatowns. As millions of new immigrants arrived, they faced language barriers, discrimination, and economic struggles. Many chose to settle in neighborhoods with others from their homeland, forming ethnic enclaves that still exist today. Little Italy, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, etc. Italian immigrants created close-knit communities with authentic markets, restaurants, and religious institutions. Chinatown, San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, etc. Chinese immigrants built communities that helped preserve their culture and protect against racial discrimination. Jewish Lower East Side, New York. A major hub for Jewish immigrants, full of synagogues, kosher delis, and Yiddish theaters. Polish and German communities, Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, etc. These cities became home to large populations of Polish and German immigrants, influencing local food, politics, and architecture. These neighborhoods were essential for survival, offering jobs, mutual aid, and cultural comfort in a foreign land. However, they also contributed to American fears of immigrants not assimilating, leading to rising tensions and anti-immigration movements. The legacy of Ellis Island and early immigration. By the time Ellis Island closed in 1954, over 40% of Americans could trace their ancestry to someone who passed through its halls. The waves of immigration from the late 19th and early 20th centuries transformed America, bringing cultural diversity, new industries, and a workforce that built the country into a global powerhouse. But with increasing immigration came growing resistance. Many native-born Americans feared job competition, cultural differences, and changes to their way of life. This led to the passage of strict immigration laws in the 1920s, drastically cutting the number of newcomers allowed into the country. Even today, the debate over immigration remains one of the most heated issues in American politics. Understanding. This history helps us see how past struggles mirror modern challenges, reminding us that America's identity has always been shaped by the people who arrive seeking a better life. Stay tuned as we explore the next era of immigration, the restrictive laws of the 1920s and the impact of World War II. Challenges and opposition, the struggles of immigrants in America. As millions of immigrants arrived in the U.S., they encountered not just new opportunities, but also deep-seated hostility and discrimination. Many Americans feared that the newcomers would take jobs, change American culture, or pose security threats. These fears fueled anti-immigrant movements, restrictive laws, and widespread prejudice that shaped immigration policy for decades. Anti-immigrant sentiment. The rise of nativism throughout American history, waves of immigration have often been met with nativist backlash, a belief that the country should prioritize native-born citizens over newcomers. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, nativists pushed for laws to limit immigration, exclude certain ethnic groups, and make life harder for immigrants already in the country. The Know Nothing Party, 1850s, anti-Catholic and anti-Irish one of the earliest and most influential nativist movements was the Know Nothing Party, a secretive political group that gained power in the 1850s. The party was strongly anti-Catholic, fearing that Irish and German immigrants, many of whom were Catholic, would be more loyal to the Pope than to American democracy. Know Nothings pushed for laws to restrict Catholic immigration, block immigrants from holding public office, and extend the time needed to become a U.S. citizen. Although the party faded after the Civil War, its anti-immigrant rhetoric laid the foundation for future restrictive policies. The Chinese Exclusion Act, 1882, the first major immigration ban as. Chinese immigrants arrived in large numbers, especially during the California Gold Rush, 1850s, and the Transcontinental Railroad construction, 1860s. They faced intense racism. Many white workers saw the Chinese as job stealers willing to work for lower wages. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 became the first major U.S. law banning immigration based on nationality. This act halted Chinese immigration for 10 years, later extended indefinitely, and prevented Chinese immigrants already in the U.S. from becoming citizens. Chinatowns across the country were often attacked in violent riots, forcing Chinese communities to stick together for protection. This law set a dangerous precedent, leading to even stricter immigration laws against other groups in the coming decades. The Immigration Act of 1924. The birth of quotas. By the early 20th century, immigration had reached record levels, with millions arriving from Italy, Poland, Russia, and other Eastern and Southern European countries. Many Americans, particularly those of Anglo-Saxon Protestant backgrounds, feared that these new immigrants were un-American and would never fully assimilate. The Immigration Act of 1924, also called the National Origins Act, created strict quotas on how many immigrants could enter from each country. It favored Northern and Western Europeans while severely limiting Southern and Eastern Europeans, such as Italians, Poles, and Jews. It completely banned immigration from Asia, further reinforcing anti-Asian sentiment. This law remained in effect until 1965, shaping the racial and ethnic makeup of the U.S. for decades. The message was clear: the U.S. was becoming less welcoming to immigrants. especially those from non-Western European backgrounds. Struggles of immigrants: discrimination, exploitation, and hardships. While anti-immigrant laws made it harder to enter the country, those who managed to immigrate still faced tremendous hardships. Many were trapped in low-paying jobs, forced to live in overcrowded slums, and targeted by discrimination. Low wages and poor working conditions. Most immigrants, especially those from working-class backgrounds, ended up in dangerous, low-paying jobs with little chance of upward mobility. Factory work. Immigrants worked long hours in textile mills, steel plants, and meatpacking factories, often in unsafe conditions. Mining and railroads. Many Irish, Polish, and Chinese workers took on some of the most dangerous jobs in coal mines. And railroad construction, suffering high injury and death rates. Sweatshops. Women and children often worked in sweatshops, sewing clothes in overcrowded, poorly ventilated rooms for extremely low pay. Child labor. Many poor immigrant families had no choice but to send their children to work in factories or mines instead of school. With no government safety regulations at the time, accidents were common, and workers had few rights to demand better conditions. Housing struggles, tenement life. Most immigrants couldn't afford homes, so they lived in tenement housing, cramped, poorly built apartment buildings in urban areas like New York City's Lower East Side, Chicago, and Boston. Tiny apartments often housed multiple families with no plumbing or ventilation. Fires, disease, and crime were rampant in tenement neighborhoods due to poor sanitation. Jacob Riis, a journalist and photographer, exposed these living conditions in his book How the Other Half Lives, Leading to Early Housing Reforms. Despite these hardships, immigrant communities found strength in each other, forming mutual aid societies, ethnic businesses, and cultural centers to support their people. The struggle between assimilation and preserving cultural identity. 1. Of the biggest challenges for immigrants was balancing their cultural heritage with the pressure to assimilate into American society. The push for assimilation. Schools, churches, and employers encouraged immigrants to speak English, adopt American customs, and abandon traditional dress and practices. Some immigrant children changed their names to sound more American to fit in. There was a strong belief that fully assimilating would lead to better job opportunities and acceptance. Preserving cultural identity. Many immigrants held onto their native languages and traditions, passing them down to future generations. Ethnic neighborhoods like Little Italy, Chinatown, and Polish neighborhoods helped maintain cultural traditions. Religious institutions, such as Catholic churches, synagogues, and Orthodox Christian communities, provided spiritual and cultural support. This tension between blending in and preserving identity still exists today, as immigrants continue to face questions about what it means to be American. The legacy of immigration struggles. Despite the hostility, discrimination, and legal barriers, immigrants continued to shape the U.S. in powerful ways. They provided the labor force that built America's industries, contributed to its cultural richness, and fought for the rights of future generations. However, many of the same debates over immigration that existed in the past continue today. Who should be allowed to enter the country? How should immigration be regulated? How do we balance national identity with cultural diversity? Understanding the challenges faced by past immigrants helps put modern immigration debates into perspective. While laws and policies have changed, the struggles of immigrants, seeking opportunity while facing opposition, remain a defining part of America's story. Stay tuned as we explore how immigration restrictions evolved in the mid-20th century and how the U.S. changed its policies. After World War II, how immigration shaped American culture. Immigrants have influenced every aspect of American life, from the food we eat to the music we listen to, the technology we use, and even the way we think about democracy and innovation. Without immigration, the United States would not be the global powerhouse of industry, science, and culture that it is today. Let's dive into the remarkable contributions of immigrants and how they have helped define American identity over time. Revolutionizing industry and the economy. From the early days of industrialization to the rise of Silicon Valley, immigrants have been at the heart of American economic growth and technological advancement. Building the railroads, 1800s. Chinese immigrants played a major role in constructing the Transcontinental Railroad, connecting the east and west coasts and boosting trade. The rise of manufacturing. Immigrants provided the backbone of the industrial workforce, working in textile mills, steel factories, and assembly lines, Silicon Valley, and tech innovation. Today, immigrants found and lead some of the biggest tech companies, including Google, Sergey Brin, Russia, Tesla, Elon Musk, South Africa, and NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, Taiwan. Transforming science and medicine. Many of the greatest minds in history came to America seeking freedom and opportunity, changing the world with their groundbreaking discoveries. Albert Einstein, Germany. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist who developed the theory of relativity and helped the U.S. develop nuclear technology. Nikola Tesla, Serbia. Invented alternating current, AC electricity, which powers homes and cities. Today. Jonas Salk, son of Russian immigrants, created the polio vaccine, eradicating one of the most feared diseases of the 20th century. Without immigrant scientists and engineers, modern medicine, electricity, and computing would not be what they are today. Influencing American cuisine. One of the most visible ways immigration has shaped American culture is through food. What we feed. Consider American cuisine is really a mix of flavors from around the world. Pizza, Italy. Now a staple food across the U.S., pizza was introduced by Italian immigrants in the late 19th century. Bagels, Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. Originally brought over in the early 1900s, bagels became a breakfast favorite. Tacos and burritos, Mexico. Mexican immigrants introduced these dishes, which are now among America's most popular foods. General Tso's chicken, Chinese immigrants. This dish was created by Chinese restaurateurs adapting flavors for American tastes. Without immigration, American cuisine would not be as diverse and beloved as it is today. Shaping arts, music, and entertainment. From Hollywood to Broadway, immigrants and their descendants have dominated the arts and entertainment industry. Charlie Chaplin, England. The silent film legend who helped define modern cinema. Irving Berlin, Russian Jewish immigrant. Composer of God Bless America and White Christmas. Bruce Lee, Hong Kong. Revolutionized martial arts films and changed how Asians were represented in Hollywood. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Austria. Immigrant turned action star who later became governor of California. Immigrant influences can be seen in jazz, rock, hip-hop, film, theater, and literature, proving that American culture is a fusion of global creativity. The melting pot versus salad bowl debate. The U.S. has long been called a melting pot, a place where people from different backgrounds blend together to form a shared national identity. However, some argue that America is more of a salad bowl, where different cultures coexist but maintain their unique traditions. The melting pot theory. Immigrants assimilate into American culture, adopting the language, customs, and values of the country. Over time, cultural differences fade away, creating a single national identity. Supporters argue that this promotes unity and helps immigrants integrate successfully. The salad bowl theory. Instead of fully assimilating, immigrants retain their distinct cultural identities while still contributing to society. Ethnic neighborhoods, bilingual education, and cultural festivals keep traditions alive. Advocates say this approach celebrates diversity rather than forcing conformity. In reality, America is both a melting pot and a salad bowl. Immigrants blend into mainstream society while also keeping their cultural heritage alive, making the U.S. a truly unique and dynamic nation. Final thoughts. Immigration as America's greatest strength. The story of immigration is the story of America itself. Every wave of newcomers has faced challenges, yet they have left an indelible mark on the nation. From science and technology to food and music, immigrants have shaped what it means to be American. And as immigration debates continue today, one thing remains true. America thrives when it embraces the contributions of all people, regardless of where they come from. Conclusion and final thoughts. America's history is deeply intertwined with immigration, from the early settlers and industrial workers to modern-day entrepreneurs and cultural icons. Throughout this journey, we've seen how immigrants have built industries, revolutionized science, enriched our cuisine, and shaped the arts. Without immigration, the United States would not be the diverse, innovative, and dynamic country it is today. Key takeaways. Immigration has been a driving force behind America's economic and cultural growth, from the railroads to Silicon Valley. The struggle of immigrants, facing discrimination, economic hardship, and political opposition, has been a constant theme throughout history. The melting pot versus salad bowl debate highlights the balance between assimilation and cultural preservation. The ongoing immigration debate today. Immigration remains one of the most debated topics in America. Some argue for stricter policies, citing concerns over jobs, national security, and resources. Others emphasize the economic and cultural benefits of welcoming new immigrants. Policies continue to evolve, reflecting the tension between national identity, economic needs, and humanitarian concerns. Your voice matters. What do you think? How has immigration shaped America? Do you see the U.S. as a melting pot or a salad bowl? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode of History Revealed.